You ever get that nagging feeling, that little voice in the back of your head that whispers, something's not right here?
Oh, definitely. Like a familiar story with a piece missing, maybe.
Exactly. A puzzle where the edges just don't quite meet.
Yeah.
Tonight, we're plunging into one of those tales. A story that starts with the heartbreaking disappearance of a young boy named Larry.
A really tough case.
But then it spirals into something far more unsettling. This, tangled web of deeply ingrained conspiracy theories.
And what's fascinating right from the outset is how this single tragic event, the vanishing of a child, it sort of gives birth to these two radically different ways of understanding what happened.
Two completely different narratives.
You have the widely accepted version, steeped in the sorrow and ambiguity that just comes with the unknown.
Right, the tragedy of it all.
And then you have this shadowy alternative narrative. It's
Yeah.
populated by unseen forces and deliberately concealed truths.
It really highlights our fundamental human drive, doesn't it? To find explanations.
Absolutely. Even when those explanations lead us down increasingly complex and, well, sometimes disturbing paths.
Exactly. So the narrative that most of us are familiar with, it's the one painted in those somber tones of news reports.
Right.
The tearful appeals from a desperate family.
The public face of the tragedy.
A young boy, Larry, simply, ceased to exist in the place where he was last seen. Maybe it was a local park, maybe his walk home from school.
Or even inside his own house, supposedly safe.
And despite extensive efforts, law enforcement, community searches,
Yeah.
absolutely no trace.
Vanished. It's a story that resonates so deeply because of its very commonness, sadly. It feels like it could happen anywhere.
That's the terrifying part.
And within that official understanding, there are, tragically, a few recurring explanations that authorities and the public often consider first.
What are those usually?
Well, first, there's the terrifying possibility of abduction, the idea that Larry was taken.
Right, either by a stranger.
The embodiment of our deepest fears as parents, really, or in some of the most gut-wrenching scenarios, by someone, within his own circle.
That immediate leap to the unthinkable. It's almost automatic.
It is. Then you also have the more accidental possibilities, scenarios that still carry immense sorrow, of course.
Like what? Just wandering off?
Yeah, the thought that young Larry might have simply wandered off, perhaps led by childish curiosity or lost in his own imagination, and then suffered some unforeseen accident, falling into a body of water, maybe getting lost in the woods, sustaining an injury that prevented him from getting help.
Less sinister, perhaps, in intent, but...
No less devastating in potential outcome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we also have to confront the grim reality, I suppose, of potential foul play within Larry's immediate environment.
Tragically, yes. In a significant number of cases involving missing children, the initial mystery eventually points towards a crime committed by someone close to home.
Those must be incredibly difficult investigations.
Oh, the most intricate and emotionally charged, often, fraught with suspicion and the potential for the most profound betrayal.
So it's this whole spectrum of agonizing possibilities, really, each one a portrait of individual tragedy.
Exactly.
But then thinking, almost like a fault line appearing in the earth, another story begins to crack through, a much darker and more intricate one.
This is where the conspiracies start to emerge.
Yeah, the whole constellation of conspiracy theories surrounding Larry's disappearance. This is where that raw, unanswered question of what happened transforms
Into something else entirely.
into a deep-seated suspicion that we are not being told the full story, that something far more deliberate and sinister is at work.
This divergence is truly telling, isn't it? It suggests a fundamental skepticism, perhaps directed at those in positions of authority.
Or maybe just a resistance to accepting the sheer randomness of tragedy, that things can just happen.
Could be. Conspiracy theories, in a way, they offer an alternative structure, right? A way to impose order on chaos by proposing an underlying intent, even if that intent is malevolent.
So instead of a random event or a tragic accident.
Exactly. These theories posit a calculated act, often orchestrated by powerful entities operating behind the scenes. It gives it a reason, even a terrible one.
Okay, let's delve into this darker realm then. A central tenet, it seems, of many of these theories is the notion of a cover-up.
That's almost always the starting point.
This implies that there are individuals, perhaps even entire organizations, actively engaged in concealing the truth about what befell Larry.
And the motivations behind such a cover-up, well, they can vary widely. from protecting reputations, maybe.
Or safeguarding much larger, more damaging secrets.
Precisely. The cover-up becomes this kind of all-encompassing explanation for the lack of answers, for any inconsistencies, whether they're real or just perceived in the official narratives.
It sets up a framework of deliberate deception.
Absolutely, where each unanswered question serves as further evidence of a deeper, more sinister plot brewing underneath.
And from that foundation, some of these theories take even more disquieting turns.
We certainly do.
The idea of ritual sacrifice, for instance. I mean, it's a chilling concept to even articulate.
It really is. This theory posits that Larry's disappearance wasn't just a random act, but rather a component of some kind of occult practice.
A ritualistic act carried out by, what, a secret society? Some other shadowy group?
At that idea, operating outside the bounds of, conventional understanding.
And is there ever any real evidence for this kind of thing?
Well, this theory, while often lacking any credible evidence, it taps into a primal human fear, doesn't it? Fear of unseen, malevolent forces at play in our seemingly rational world.
Like modern myths, almost.
It echoes ancient myths of sacrifice, twisted into a modern nightmare. These theories, despite their frequent lack of factual basis, they resonate with a deep-seated human fascination with the forbidden and the hidden.
They conjure up images of clandestine gatherings and arcane practices.
Layering an almost mythical horror onto an already deeply tragic event. Yeah.
Okay, then you have another one. The government experiment hypothesis. This feels almost like it's lifted straight from, I don't know, sci-fi.
It does have that feel. This suggests that Larry might have been taken as part of some top-secret government program.
Involving what? Mind control.
That's one version. Or maybe advanced and untested scientific applications, or even, in some of the more extreme versions, contact with extraterrestrial life.
Wow.
This particular strain of conspiracy theory, it often reflects broader anxieties about government secrecy, right? And the potential for hidden agendas being carried out without public knowledge or consent.
So it takes the idea of a cover-up and just amplifies it massively.
To a truly grand, almost unbelievable scale. It's interesting how these narratives tap into existing cultural anxieties and tropes, isn't it?
The fear of the unknown, the distrust of powerful institutions.
Fertile ground for such theories to take root. Absolutely.
Interestingly, there's also a slightly less sinister, though still conspiratorial, idea that occasionally surfaces: the witness protection scenario.
Ah, yes, I've heard that one floated in similar cases.
What's the thinking there?
It proposes that Larry might have witnessed a crime, maybe, or come into possession of sensitive information.
And so he was relocated.
And as a result, was secretly relocated under a new identity for his own safety. This theory, while it still implies a level of official deception, of course,
It's not quite as dark as the others.
it often stems from a place of hoping for a positive outcome, I think. The idea that Larry might still be alive and well somewhere, just living under a different name.
It offers maybe a small flicker of hope amidst the prevailing darkness.
A less overtly malevolent explanation, perhaps. But what's crucial to remember when we consider these various theories is the human tendency towards confirmation bias.
Explain that a bit.
Well, we're just more likely to see and interpret information in a way that confirms what we already believe or maybe want to believe.
Right, so if you already suspect a cover-up,
Exactly. Someone already leaning towards a conspiracy will readily see, say, a minor timeline shift in an official report as proof of a cover-up.
whereas someone else might see it
As simple human error in a complex investigation. An honest mistake.
That makes sense. So when you delve into the online forums and discussions surrounding these conspiracy theories, you start to see the evidence that proponents frequently cite.
Oh, yes. The forums can be quite something.
And as you pointed out earlier, it's largely circumstantial, isn't it? Very much open to interpretation.
Almost entirely. You'll see people highlighting minor inconsistencies in witness statements, maybe a slight alteration in the timeline reported by authorities,
And these discrepancies are seized upon.
as concrete proof of a deliberate attempt to mislead the public. What's fascinating here is how normal human error, or the inevitable discrepancies that can arise during any complex, lengthy investigation.
Things get misremembered. Details change.
Exactly. They get reinterpreted as deliberate acts of deception, as key indicators of a grand conspiracy at play. Every slight deviation from a perfect linear narrative becomes further fuel for the conspiratorial fire.
And then there are the unexplained clues you hear about. Like a strange symbol discovered near where Larry disappeared. Or a cryptic message supposedly left behind.
Right. These ambiguous details become imbued with profound significance. They're interpreted as evidence of occult involvement, perhaps, or a coded communication directly related to the overarching conspiracy.
It's pattern seeking, maybe.
The human brain is remarkably adept at finding patterns, even where none truly exist. So when confronted with a void of concrete information, like in Larry's case, these seemingly random details can take on an outsized importance.
They become critical pieces in the puzzle.
Within a larger, albeit entirely speculative, puzzle, yes.
And I think one of the most emotionally potent pieces of evidence, at least in the minds of many, is simply the enduring lack of closure.
That's a huge factor.
The fact that Larry's disappearance remains an open case for years, sometimes even decades, that itself becomes inherently suspicious in the eyes of conspiracy theorists.
The very absence of a definitive answer is taken as irrefutable proof that the real answer is being deliberately withheld.
The emotional weight of that must be immense.
For the family, for the community, it's enormous. This lack of resolution can create a vacuum and emptiness that conspiracy theories readily step in to fill. They offer a semblance of explanation,
Even if that explanation is ultimately based on conjecture rather than verifiable facts.
Precisely.
You also observe a heightened scrutiny placed on the behavior of individuals connected to the case.
Oh, definitely. Family members, law enforcement officials, even witnesses who came forward early on.
Any perceived hesitation, maybe. Any display of emotion that doesn't quite align with what some might expect.
It can be swiftly interpreted as a sign of guilt, or at the very least of knowing more than they are letting on, of being complicit in the real truth.
That level of intense scrutiny, that must be incredibly damaging and often deeply unfair.
It really can be. Grief manifests in so many different ways. And to interpret someone's reaction under unimaginable stress as definitive evidence of malfeasance, it's a dangerous and often cruel leap to make.
And finally, there's this noticeable tendency to link Larry's disappearance to other unsolved cases, ones that share maybe superficial similarities.
Yes, drawing connections between disparate events. Theorists will often point to these perceived connections, suggesting a broader pattern, perhaps a more extensive network.
Or the potential involvement of the same shadowy group or individuals across multiple, seemingly unrelated incidents.
This innate human desire to find connections, to perceive a larger, more coherent picture, it's understandable. It offers a sense of order, perhaps.
And maybe even the comforting thought that solving one mystery might unlock others.
Perhaps. However, these connections are frequently tenuous, often based on superficial resemblances rather than concrete, verifiable evidence.
So, okay, according to these intricate webs of speculation, what are the driving forces behind all this alleged secrecy? What are the motives for going to such extraordinary lengths to conceal the truth about what happened to young Larry?
The motives, as you might imagine, tend to be as dramatic and varied as the theories themselves. A recurring theme is the protection of powerful individuals.
Right, someone important involved.
The idea that someone wealthy, influential, maybe politically connected, was somehow involved in Larry's disappearance and is now leveraging their power to suppress any potentially incriminating information from coming to light.
That taps into a very real societal unease, doesn't it? About the potential for those in positions of authority to evade accountability.
Absolutely. It resonates with a deep-seated distrust. Then you have the concept of suppressing a dark secret.
Like what kind of secret?
Perhaps a history of abuse within the family, maybe an ongoing criminal enterprise operating within the local community, or going back to the government experiment idea.
Right.
A desperate need to keep a dangerous or highly embarrassing program completely under wraps. The secret itself becomes the central driving force behind the elaborate cover-up.
The perceived stakes are just incredibly high.
So high that those in the know are believed to be willing to do anything to prevent the truth from ever being revealed.
Exactly. The perceived stakes become enormous, justifying increasingly elaborate and risky actions in the minds of the theorists.
And in some of the more far-reaching theories, the motive broadens even further, to encompass the maintenance of public order.
That's another angle. The notion that the authorities might be actively concealing a deeply disturbing truth may be related to those ritual sacrifice scenarios, or even something like extraterrestrial contact.
To prevent widespread panic?
Exactly, to prevent panic and potential social unrest. This speaks to a kind of paternalistic and often distrusted view of authority.
The idea that the general public just can't handle the real truth.
And therefore needs to be shielded from it through systematic deception. It's a narrative that suggests a fundamental lack of trust in the public's ability to cope with difficult realities, a sense that those in control know best and must act accordingly, even if it involves widespread deception.
And then you have the theories that point towards a more active, maybe sinister agenda. Yes, where the disappearance isn't just covered up, but is intrinsically linked to some larger, more insidious plan.
Like population control, social engineering.
Or the advancement of a specific, often nefarious ideological goal. These are the most expansive theories, and often the most challenging to either substantiate or refute.
Because they operate on such an abstract level.
Frequently involving shadowy organizations with long-term, carefully concealed objectives. These theories often tap into broader societal anxieties about the direction of the world and the potential for hidden forces to be manipulating events on a massive scale.
It's a really captivating, if deeply unsettling, landscape of speculation we've been mapping out.
It certainly is.
But it's absolutely crucial, as we touched on right at the beginning, to approach these theories with a healthy dose of critical thinking.
Essential.
What are the inherent challenges in actually verifying any of these claims? And what are the potential negative consequences that can arise from these kinds of narratives taking hold?
Well, the most significant hurdle, without a doubt, is the fundamental absence of concrete, verifiable evidence. It nearly always comes down to that.
So much is interpretation.
The vast majority of what is presented as proof relies heavily on interpretation, conjecture, and that tendency we mentioned to fill in gaps in the factual record with suspicion rather than demonstrable facts.
And confirmation bias plays into that too.
Exactly. And as we discussed earlier, this is often compounded by cognitive biases like confirmation bias. We see what we expect or want to see.
And the very nature of an unsolved missing person case, with its inherent lack of definitive answers.
It creates this incredibly fertile ground for speculation to flourish. The unanswered questions, the persistent ambiguity, they naturally drive people to seek explanations.
And sometimes those explanations, however compelling they might seem,
venture far beyond the realm of established fact and deep into the realm of conspiracy. The human need for closure, for a satisfying resolution, is incredibly powerful.
You need an ending to the story.
And when that closure isn't provided by the official investigation, people will often understandably seek it elsewhere, even in narratives that lack a solid evidentiary foundation.
We also have to seriously consider the very real and profound pain and anxiety that these unresolved cases inflict on the families and loved ones of the missing.
Absolutely paramount.
Conspiracy theories, while sometimes offering a sense of explanation, maybe even temporary comfort for some, they can also inadvertently exacerbate that pain.
How so?
By creating further confusion and distrust, perhaps, and some truly unfortunate instances, even leading to harassment or the misdirection of already stretched investigative resources.
That's a critical point. The focus can tragically shift away from the victim and the genuine search for answers towards these elaborate, often baseless theories.
Which must be deeply hurtful.
And re-traumatizing for those most directly affected by the original tragedy.
Absolutely. And there's the very real danger of victim blaming too, however unintentional it might be.
A terrible byproduct.
Some conspiracy theories, in their attempts to explain the unexplainable, can inadvertently cast suspicion on the family members or loved ones of the missing person.
Adding another layer of completely unwarranted suffering to their already immense grief. This is a particularly insidious and harmful aspect of some of these narratives.
Where the focus shifts from the potential perpetrator or the actual circumstances.
To questioning the motives or past actions of the victim's own family, often based on nothing more than speculation and innuendo. It's cruel.
Finally, we absolutely cannot ignore the very real potential for misinformation to actively impede any legitimate and ongoing investigations.
A huge problem in the digital age.
False leads generated by conspiracy theories, maybe? Unfounded accusations directed at innocent parties.
And the widespread dissemination of inaccurate information, all of it can serve to distract law enforcement, muddy the investigative waters.
And ultimately make it even more challenging to uncover the truth, wherever it may actually lie.
In our increasingly interconnected world, saturated with readily available information, the ability to discern credible sources from mere speculation and outright falsehoods becomes ever more critical.
It's hard to navigate.
Conspiracy theories, by their very nature, often thrive in this environment of ambiguity and can spread with remarkable speed and reach, making it exceptionally difficult to maintain focus on factual evidence and employ effective investigative strategies.
So, the enduring mystery of young Larry's disappearance. a profound tragedy that has, for many, become inextricably linked with this intricate and unsettling web of conspiracy theories.
A tragic case study in many ways.
These narratives, often fueled by that deep-seated desire for answers and a pervasive suspicion of hidden truths and powerful actors, they offer a compelling alternative, don't they, to the often frustrating uncertainty of the official account.
They offer an answer, even if it's not the answer.
But as we've explored in this deep dive, it is absolutely vital to approach these kinds of theories with a robustly critical perspective. Recognizing the often circumstantial nature of their purported evidence and the very real potential for significant harm that they can inflict on those already suffering.
The human cost is often overlooked.
Ultimately, Larry's story serves as a stark and poignant reminder of the enduring power of unsolved mysteries and the delicate, often fraught balance between the fundamental human need to understand the inexplicable.
And the ever-present risk of speculation overshadowing the profound reality of human loss and the ongoing, often arduous quest for truth.
It certainly leaves you contemplating, doesn't it, the countless stories that continue to linger in the shadows of our collective consciousness.
It does.
And maybe the profound responsibility each of us carries in how we choose to interpret them. That's something to think about.